The house was quiet in the way that only a happy home can be. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, nor the heavy, suffocating silence of things left unsaid. At least, not yet. It was the comfortable silence of a Thursday afternoon, where the only sounds were the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant, soft humming coming from the kitchen. Ethan Walker stood in the living room, a dust rag in his hand. He was a man of routine, a man of steady habits. At 45, Ethan had the kind of face that people trusted instinctively, lines etched by easy smiles rather than frowns, eyes that held a steady, calm warmth. He wasn't a man who looked for trouble. He wasn't a man who pried. For 16 years of marriage, he had treated Laura's privacy with a reverence that bordered on religious. Her nightstand drawer, her old jewelry box, the stack of leather-bound journals she kept on the top shelf of the closet. Those were her territories. Her quiet places, she called them. Spaces where she could retreat when the world became too loud. Ethan understood that. He loved that about her. He loved that she had depths he didn't need to swim in to appreciate. But today, the sunlight was hitting the mahogany bookshelf in a way that revealed a thick layer of gray dust, the kind that accumulates when life gets too busy to notice the corners. Laura had been working double shifts at the clinic. She was exhausted. Ethan had thought he was doing something kind, a small act of service. He wiped the spine of a leather-bound classic, Jane Eyre, then a collection of poetry. Then, his hand paused over a thick, dark blue hardback. It was pushed slightly back, as if it had tried to hide itself in the shadows of the shelf. He didn't recognize the title. It was an old novel, the jacket torn at the corners, smelling of vanilla and thyme. He pulled it out, intending only to wipe the dust from its cover. But as he tilted the book, gravity made a decision that would alter the course of his entire life. Slip. Something fell from the pages. It didn't land with a thud. It landed with a whisper, a soft, breathless sound against the hardwood floor. Ethan looked down. It was an envelope, or at least it had been an envelope once. Now it was a relic. The paper had yellowed to the color of old parchment, brittle and thin, the kind of paper that feels like it might disintegrate if you hold it too tightly. Ethan froze. The dust rag hung limp in his hand. He shouldn't touch it. He knew that. It wasn't his. It had fallen from her book, from her world. But there was something about the way it lay there, isolated, vulnerable, that pulled at him. He bent his knees, crouching down, his joints popping in the quiet room. He reached out. His fingertips brushed the paper. Felt strange, wavy, stiff in some places, soft in others. He picked it up, bringing it into the stream of afternoon sunlight. There was no name on the front, no address, no stamp, just a date, written in blue ink that had faded to a ghostly gray. June 14th, 2005. Ethan stared at the numbers. He did the math instinctively, though he didn't want to. 20 years. 20 years ago. He tried to place himself in 2005. He was 25 then, living in Chicago, working his first corporate job, aimless and single. He didn't know Laura then. He wouldn't meet Laura for another 5 years. This envelope belonged to a time before him, a time before us. He turned the envelope over in his hands. It was unsealed. The glue had long since given up its hold, dried out by the passing of 2 decades. And then he saw it, the texture. He ran his thumb along the bottom edge of the paper. It was rough, warped. Stain lines rippled across the surface like tide marks on a beach. Water damage, but not just water. It looked handled. It looked like paper that had been gripped by damp, shaking hands. The handwriting was unrecognizable. It was Laura's. He could see the loop of the L and the sharp cross of the T. But it was different. It was jagged, rushed, the writing of someone whose hand couldn't keep up with their racing mind. His eyes locked on the first sentence. If someone finds this, it means I never got the chance to tell you the truth. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't a receipt. This wasn't a grocery list. This wasn't a diary entry about a crush. It means I never got the chance to tell you the truth. His eyes darted to the next line, ignoring his brain's screaming command to stop. I am writing this because I don't think I'm going to see the morning. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. This was a suicide note, or a deathbed confession. He gripped the paper tighter, crinkling the edges. He needed to know. He had to know. Who was she writing to? He skipped down the page, past lines of smeared ink, searching for a name. And there it was. Michael. If you ever read this, please forgive me. Ethan stopped breathing. Michael. The name hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He knew Laura's history. He knew about her college years, her first job, her parents passing away when she was young. He knew the names of her childhood dogs. He knew her favorite color, sage green, and her least favorite food, cilantro. He did not know a Michael. For 16 years, that name had never crossed her lips. So who was he? An ex-lover? A husband she'd forgotten to mention? A man she had loved so much that she wrote him a final goodbye when she thought she was dying? Ethan looked toward the kitchen again. He could hear the clatter of plates. The normalcy of it made him sick. She was in there, setting the table for their dinner, while he stood here holding a piece of her soul that she had hidden from him for 2 decades. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of jealousy, ugly and hot. Michael. He looked back at the letter. This isn't a love letter. The next line read, as if she knew what he was thinking. This is a goodbye. Ethan folded the paper quickly, shoving it into his pocket as he heard Laura's footsteps returning. Ethan? She called out. Dinner. Coming. He choked out. He walked toward the kitchen, his legs feeling heavy, like he was wading through water. He looked at his wife, the woman he had woken up next to for nearly 6,000 mornings. She smiled at him, holding out a plate, but for the first time in 16 years, when Ethan looked at her, he didn't just see his wife. He saw a stranger who had a secret named Michael, and a stranger who, 20 years ago, thought she was going to die. Dinner was torture. The lasagna was perfect, rich, cheesy, exactly how he liked it, but to Ethan it tasted like ash. He sat across from Laura, watching her. He watched the way she blew on her fork before taking a bite, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the way she scrolled through her phone, chuckling at a video her sister had sent. She was so present, so here. But the letter in his pocket felt like a burning coal, branding his skin through the denim of his jeans. If someone finds this, it means I never got the chance to tell you the truth. You're awfully quiet tonight, Laura said, breaking the silence. She put her fork down and studied him. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with gold, eyes he thought he could read like a map. Is it work? Did the account with the Henderson firm fall through? Ethan gripped his fork. He forced himself to swallow the lump in his throat. No, he said, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. Work is fine, just a headache. Came on sudden. Laura's face instantly softened into concern. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm, her skin soft. I'm sorry, babe, she soothed. Do you want some ibuprofen? I can get the gel caps you like. Ethan looked at her hand covering his. It was the hand of his wife, the hand that had held his at his mother's funeral, the hand that had high-fived him when he got his promotion. But now, he looked at her fingers and wondered, did these hands write that letter? Did these hands shake with fear 20 years ago? Did these hands reach out for a man named Michael? He gently pulled his hand away, pretending to reach for his water glass. He saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes, but he couldn't help it. He couldn't touch her right now, not with the secret burning in his pocket. "I'm fine," he said a little too sharply. "Just tired." Laura pulled her hand back, resting it in her lap. "Okay," she said softly. "Well, let's get you to bed early." She stood up and started clearing the plates. Ethan watched her back as she moved to the sink. "Who is Michael?" The voice in his head screamed. "Why have you never said his name?" He remembered their first date. A coffee shop in downtown. It was raining. Laura had been wearing a yellow raincoat. She had seemed so open, so transparent. She had told him about her love for old bookstores, her fear of thunder, her dream of visiting Italy. She had told him, "I don't like secrets. They take too much energy to keep." Liar, he thought. The anger surprised him, surged up, mixing with the fear. He stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loud against the floor. "I'm going to the garage," he announced. "Need to check the tire pressure on the sedan." The light came on. It was a lie, a stupid lie. Laura paused, holding a dirty plate. "Now? Ethan, it's dark, and you have a headache." "It'll just take a minute," he muttered, not looking at her. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, past the living room, past the bookshelf where the blue book still sat, and out the side door to the garage. As soon as the heavy door clicked shut behind him, the silence of the garage enveloped him. It smelled of oil and concrete and cold air. He didn't check the tires. He walked to the workbench in the corner, under the solitary bulb of the hanging shop light. His hands were trembling violently now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. In the harsh, unforgiving light of the garage, the paper looked even older. The water stains looked like dried tears. He laid it flat on the workbench, smoothing out the creases. He needed to read the rest. He needed to know the extent of the betrayal. He needed to know if the last 16 years of his life had been a lie. He took a deep breath and read on. The handwriting shifted as he moved down the page. The letters became more jagged, the ink pressing harder into the paper, as if the writer was fighting to keep the pen steady. "Michael, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever even see this. Maybe they'll find this in the wreckage and throw it away. Maybe it will burn." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Wreckage?" He read on. "But if you do read this, I need you to know that I was scared. I'm scared right now. More scared than I've ever been in my life." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The fear in the words was palpable. It wasn't the melodramatic fear of a teenager. It was the raw, primal fear of someone facing the end. "I should have never gone with you that night," the letter continued. "The storm was too strong. The roads were too dark. I told you we should pull over, but you were so angry. You were driving so fast." Ethan paused, his mind racing. A car, a storm, an angry driver. Laura had never mentioned a serious car accident. She had a small scar on her knee that she claimed was from a bicycle fall when she was 12. Was that a lie too? And when the car hit the guardrail and spun, I remember the sound, metal screaming, the glass shattering, the world turning upside down. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. Ethan leaned heavily against the workbench. He felt sick. She had been in a crash. A bad one. I woke up in the hospital with tubes in my arms and a machine breathing for me. A doctor told me I was lucky. He told me they didn't know if I would make it through the night. My lung collapsed. My ribs are shattered. Ethan closed his eyes, a wave of nausea hitting him. Laura. His Laura. Broken and bleeding in a hospital bed. Why had she never told him? Why hide something so massive? Survivors of trauma usually shared these things with their spouses. It was part of who they were, unless the reason she hid it was because of who she was with. Michael. He forced his eyes back to the page. But Michael, lying here in this bed, waiting to see if my body gives up, I'm not thinking about the pain. I'm not thinking about the accident. Ethan's heart hammered. Here it comes, he thought. The confession. I'm thinking about you. The words hit him like a physical blow. I'm thinking about how much I loved you, how much I tried to make you happy, how much I gave up just to see you smile. Ethan groaned, a low, wounded sound in the empty garage. She had loved him, deeply, desperately. You were my whole world, Michael. Even when you were cruel, even when you ignored me, I loved you with everything I had. Cruel? Ignored her? Ethan's jealousy twisted into confusion. This Michael sounded abusive, or at least negligent. But the truth is, the letter continued, the ink splotched here, as if a tear had hit the page before it dried. The truth is, I loved you more than I ever admitted to myself. And that's why this hurts so much. Ethan slammed his hand down on the workbench. Damn it, he yelled. The sound echoed off the concrete walls. He felt betrayed. Not just because she had loved someone else, everyone has a past, but because of the intensity of it. This wasn't a high school fling. This was a soul-deep, tragic, consuming love that she had kept secret for 2 decades. She had nearly died, and her last thought had been of him, and she had kept the letter. That was the nail in the coffin. If she was truly over him, if Michael was just a bad memory, why keep the letter? Why tuck it into a book she kept safe? People keep things they cherish. People keep things they don't want to let go of. Ethan looked at the date again. June 14th, 2005. 5 years later, she met Ethan. Had she settled? Was Ethan just the safe choice? The nice guy who wouldn't drive fast in the rain? The man who wouldn't be cruel? Was she with him because she loved him, or because she was too broken to find another Michael? He felt tears prick his eyes, hot, angry tears. He folded the letter. He couldn't read anymore right now. It was too much. He shoved it back into his pocket and wiped his face with his sleeve. He had to go back inside. He had to face her. He had to sleep next to a woman who suddenly felt like a complete stranger. When Ethan came back inside, the house was dark. Laura had gone to bed. He walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under his weight. He stopped at the bedroom door and pushed it open gently. The room was bathed in the soft, silvery light of the moon coming through the sheer curtains. Laura was asleep. She was curled on her side, one hand tucked under her pillow, her breathing slow and rhythmic. She looked peaceful, innocent. Ethan stood by the side of the bed, looking down at her. He looked for the scar. He scanned her arms, her neck. The duvet covered her body. He remembered the times he had seen her undressed. She was modest, usually changing in the bathroom or with the lights off. He had always thought it was just shyness. Now he wondered if she was hiding the map of her pain. He stripped off his clothes in the dark, moving mechanically. He slid into bed beside her, keeping a wide distance between them. Usually he would spoon her. He would wrap an arm around her waist and pull her close, burying his face in her hair. It was how they slept every night. Tonight, he lay on the edge of the mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above him. Who is Michael? The fan blades sliced through the air. Swish, swish, swish. Where is he now? Does she still think about him? Laura stirred. She rolled over in her sleep, her arm flopping across the empty space between them until her hand landed on Ethan's chest. Ethan flinched. Her touch, usually his anchor, felt like a brand. He gently, carefully, picked up her hand and moved it back to her side of the bed. She murmured something in her sleep, A soft, unintelligible mumble. Ethan held his breath, listening. Say a name, he thought, tortured. Say his name. But she just sighed and settled deeper into the pillow. Ethan turned his head to look at her one more time. "Who are you?" he whispered into the darkness. There was no answer, only the rhythm of her breath and the weight of 20 years of silence pressing down on his chest. He knew he couldn't keep this inside. He wasn't an actor. He couldn't pretend. Tomorrow he would have to find out. Tomorrow the illusion would break. The past June 14th, 2005, the rain wasn't falling. It was attacking. Sheets of water hammered against the windshield of the red Honda Civic, blurring the world into streaks of gray and black. The wipers were useless, slapping back and forth in a frantic, losing battle. Inside the car, the air was thick with tension and the smell of wet wool. "Michael, please," Laura said. Her voice was small, trembling. She was 19 years old, clutching the door handle with knuckles that were white as bone. "You're going too fast. I can't see anything." The man in the driver's seat didn't look at her. His jaw was clenched tight, a muscle jumping in his cheek. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "I just want to get there, Laura," he snapped. "Stop whining." "I'm not whining," she whispered. "I'm scared." "You're always scared," Michael shot back, his eyes fixed on the wet asphalt. "Scared of the dark. Scared of my friends. Scared of living. That's not fair." "It is fair. God, you're suffocating me." Laura shrank back against the seat. The words cut deeper than the cold. She loved him. She loved him with a desperate, pathetic intensity that she hated in herself. She had skipped classes for him. She had alienated her friends for him. She had reshaped herself into something smaller, quieter, just to fit into the spaces he allowed her. "I'm sorry," she said, the automatic apology falling from her lips. Please slow down. I know what I'm doing," Michael yelled. He slammed his foot down on the gas pedal, as if to prove a point, as if to punish the storm for existing. The car surged forward. The speedometer climbed. 60. 70. "Michael!" Laura screamed. The curve appeared out of nowhere. A sharp, hairpin turn hidden by the deluge. Michael jerked the wheel. The tires lost their grip. The car ceased to be a vehicle and became a projectile. For a second, there was a terrible, weightless silence. Then the world disintegrated. Crunch. The sound of metal tearing was louder than anything Laura had ever heard. The car spun. Glass exploded inward like diamond dust. The guardrail sheared through the passenger side door. The car flipped. Once, twice. Laura felt a crushing impact against her chest. The air was ripped from her lungs. Her head slammed against the window, and then everything stopped. There was only the sound of the rain drumming on the overturned chassis. Laura opened her eyes. The world was upside down. Blood was dripping into her eye, warm and sticky. She tried to move, but her body screamed. A pain so white-hot and absolute that it blinded her. "Michael?" she wheezed. There was no answer from the driver's side. She couldn't turn her head. She was pinned. The darkness began to creep in at the edges of her vision. A cold, black tide rising to swallow her. She was going to die here, in the rain, in the dark. And as the consciousness began to slip away, her mind didn't go to her parents. It didn't go to God. It went to the pen and paper in her backpack. "I have to tell him," she thought, her mind fracturing. "I have to tell him I tried." But she couldn't move. The darkness took her. Ethan woke up with a headache that throbbed behind his eyes. The morning light was filtering through the blinds. Cruel, bright, uncompromising. He rolled over. The bed was empty. Laura was already up. He could smell coffee. The normalcy of it was infuriating. Ethan sat up, rubbing his face. The events of the previous night came rushing back. The book, the envelope, the letter, Michael. He checked his jeans on the floor. The letter was still in the pocket. He got dressed slowly. He put on a gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked in the mirror. He looked tired, older. He walked out to the kitchen. Laura was standing by the counter, buttering toast. She was wearing her silk robe, her hair wet from the shower. She looked fresh, renewed. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, turning to smile at him. "I let you sleep in. You were tossing and turning all night." Ethan stopped in the doorway. He looked at her. He tried to find the 19-year-old girl in the car crash. He tried to find the woman who loved Michael. "Yeah," he said roughy. "Bad dreams." Laura brought a plate of toast to the table. "Want to talk about them?" "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. Laura paused. She looked at him, her smile fading slightly. "Okay. Well, coffee's hot." Ethan poured himself a mug. His hand shook slightly as he lifted the pot. He sat down at the table opposite her. "Laura," he started. She looked up, a piece of toast halfway to her mouth. "Yeah." Ethan's heart hammered. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the letter on the table and demand the truth. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to be sure. He needed to see if she would lie. "I was thinking," he said, staring into his black coffee. "We've been married 16 years. "We have," she smiled softly. "Best years of my life. And we know everything about each other, right?" Laura chewed her toast slowly. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Of course, Ethan. Why are you asking that?" "I don't know," Ethan lied. I was reading an article about how people have whole lives before they meet their spouses. Secret lives." Laura laughed, but it sounded a little brittle. "Well, I don't know about secret lives. But sure, we all have a past. I mean, you had that girlfriend in college who played the tuba. That's a past. Right?" Ethan said. He leaned forward. "But nothing heavy? Nothing traumatic?" Laura froze. It was subtle. If he hadn't been watching her like a hawk, he would have missed it. Her hand stilled on the table. Her eyes flickered down to her plate for a split second before coming back up to meet his. "Traumatic?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. "I mean, losing my parents was traumatic, Ethan. You know that." "I know," he said. "I meant to you, physically. Did you ever get hurt? Or have a close call?" Laura stared at him. The air in the kitchen grew thick. "Ethan, what is this about?" she asked quietly. "You're acting strange." "I'm just asking, Laura," he pressed. "Did you?" She took a breath. She picked up her coffee mug, bringing it to her lips as if to use it as a shield. "No," she said. The lie hung in the air between them. "I've always been healthy," she added. "You know that." Ethan felt a crack form in his heart. She lied. She looked him in the eye and lied. He knew about the accident now. The letter detailed the collapsed lung, the shattered ribs, the tubes. If she could lie about that, what else was she lying about? Was she still seeing Michael? Was she emailing him? Ethan stood up. "I have to go to work." "Ethan, you haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." As he backed the car out of the driveway, he saw her standing in the window, watching him. Her arms were crossed over her chest, hugging herself. She looked small. She looked scared. Ethan drove away, the letter burning a hole in his pocket. The confrontation was coming. He could feel it. But first, he had to finish reading. He had to know the end of the story she had written 20 years ago. Ethan didn't go to his office. He couldn't. The idea of sitting under fluorescent lights, listening to coworkers complain about the coffee or the weather, felt impossible. How do you type emails about quarterly projections when your entire reality is fracturing? Instead, he drove to the far end of the parking lot, backed his sedan into a spot facing the chain-link fence, and killed the engine. The rain started then, a light, miserable drizzle that blurred the world outside, mirroring the chaos inside him. He pulled the letter out again. His hands were steadier now, but his heart was a heavy, thudding weight in his chest. He felt like a detective at a crime scene, the crime scene of his own marriage. He needed to understand the timeline. He needed to understand the depth of the wound. He found his place on the crinkled page. I woke up in the hospital with tubes in my arms, and a doctor telling me they didn't know if I would make it. He read the next paragraph. The ink slightly smeared where Laura's hand must have dragged across the page 20 years ago. It's been 3 days, Michael. The nurses are kind, but they look at me with pity. They ask if there is anyone they can call. Parents? Siblings? A boyfriend? Ethan flinched. He knew Laura had no parents. They died when she was 16 in a house fire. It was the foundational tragedy of her life, the thing that made her so protective of their home. But he hadn't known she was this alone. I told them no. I told them there was no one. Because I can't call you. I can't let you see me like this. Broken. Ugly. Sewn back together. Ethan stared at the word ugly. Laura was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Not in a flashy magazine way, but in a soul-deep way. To think of her lying in a hospital bed, feeling ugly, feeling abandoned. It tore him apart. But then, the anger returned. I can't call you because I know you wouldn't come. You walked away from the crash, Michael. I saw you. Through the shattered glass, I saw you climb out. You looked at the car. You looked at me. And you ran. Ethan gasped aloud in the empty car. Jesus! Michael hadn't just been a bad boyfriend. He had left her for dead. He was the driver. He crashed the car. And he fled the scene while Laura lay crushed inside. Rage, white-hot and blinding, flooded Ethan's veins. He wanted to find this man. He wanted to hunt him down 20 years later and destroy him. But as he read on, the rage curdled into something more confusing, something more painful. But even knowing that, even knowing you left me to die in the rain, I don't hate you. Ethan shook his head. Why? He pleaded with the paper. Hate him, Laura. Hate him. I can't hate you, because I know you were scared too. I know you were just a boy, and I know that I loved you enough to forgive you, even if you never asked for it. Ethan dropped the letter to his lap. He leaned his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes. She forgave him. She had nearly died, been abandoned in a wreck, and she forgave him. And she kept the letter. That was the thought that kept circling back, like a vulture. If she had moved on, if she had truly healed, she would have burned this letter years ago. She would have shredded it. Keeping it meant she still needed it. Keeping it meant that Michael, the coward, the criminal, the boy who ran, still held a piece of her heart that Ethan could never touch. She loves him, Ethan whispered to the rain. She still loves him. The past June 17, 2005, the hospital room smelled of antiseptic and stale jello. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss-click of the ventilator in the next bed, where an old man was fighting his own battle. Laura lay in bed she was small beneath the thin hospital blanket. Her face was a map of bruising, purples, yellows, and angry reds. A bandage covered the stitches on her forehead. Her left arm was in a cast. Her ribs were taped so tightly she could only take shallow, sipping breaths. She was 19, but she felt 100. The pain was a constant, dull roar, but the silence was worse. Other patients had visitors. The woman in bed 2 had a husband who brought her flowers and held her hand for hours. The boy in bed 1 had parents who argued in hushed tones about insurance. Laura had a notebook, A nurse, a kind woman named Sarah with kind eyes and tired feet, had brought it to her from the gift shop. "You need to get it out, honey," Sarah had said, patting Laura's uninjured hand. "Whatever is eating you up inside, put it on paper. It draws the poison out." So Laura wrote. Her hand shook uncontrollably. The pen felt heavy like a lead pipe. Michael. Writing his name made her chest ache more than the broken ribs. She looked at the empty chair beside her bed. She imagined him sitting there. She imagined him saying he was sorry. She imagined him holding her hand and telling her she was going to be okay. But the chair was empty. He was gone. He had run into the dark, into the storm, leaving her twisted in the metal. She should hate him. She knew that. Any rational person would hate him. But love wasn't rational. Love was a habit she couldn't break. She had spent 2 years making herself small for him, making herself quiet for him, loving him so hard she thought it would fix him. It hadn't fixed him. It had almost killed her. She wrote the words, tears dripping onto the paper, warping the cheap pulp. "If someone finds this, it means I never got the chance to tell you the truth." She wrote because she thought she might die tonight. Her lung was weak. The doctor had looked worried during rounds. If she died, she didn't want to die angry. She didn't want to die with a heart full of hate. She wanted to die with love, even if it was for the wrong person. She finished the page, her hand cramping. She folded it, tucked it into the envelope Sarah had given her, and slid it inside the book she had been reading before the crash. Jane Eyre, a story about a girl who survived. Laura closed her eyes, clutching the book to her chest. "Please," she whispered to the empty room. "Let me live." Ethan returned home at 6 p.m. He felt like an intruder in his own house. He parked the car and sat for a moment, composing his face. He had to be calm. He had to be the steady Ethan he had always been. If he cracked now, he might say things he couldn't take back. He walked inside. Laura was in the living room folding laundry. The TV was on low, some cooking show she liked. It looked so normal, so domestic. "Hey," she said, looking up. Her smile was tentative, gauging his mood. "Feeling better? You ran out of here pretty fast this morning." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. He noticed the way she moved. A slight stiffness in her left side when she bent down to pick up a sock. He had always thought it was just how she moved. Now he saw the phantom limp of a crash survivor. "Yeah," Ethan lied. "Work was busy. Sorry." He walked over to her. He needed to test the waters. He needed to see if she would flinch. He reached out and touched her arm, the left one, the one that had been broken. Laura didn't flinch, but she went still. "Your arm okay?" he asked softly. She looked at him, confusion knitting her brows. "My arm? Yeah, it's fine." "Why?" "Just... you were rubbing it." "Was I?" She glanced down at her arm. "Must be the weather. The rain makes my joints ache sometimes. Getting old, I guess." The rain, Ethan thought, or the metal that crushed you. "Laura," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Ethan, you're scaring me," she said, dropping the shirt she was holding. She took a step toward him. "What is going on? You've been acting like a stranger for 24 hours. Did I do something? Did you meet someone?" Ethan laughed, a harsh bark of a laugh that had no humor in it. "Did I meet someone?" he repeated. "That's rich." Laura recoiled as if he'd slapped her. "What is that supposed to mean?" Ethan turned away. He couldn't look at her hurt face. Not when she was the one with the secret. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just tired. I'm going to take a shower." "Ethan, talk to me," she pleaded. "Not now, Laura." He walked down the hall, leaving her standing amidst the piles of clean laundry. He locked the bathroom door and turned on the shower, letting the water run hot. He didn't get in. He just sat on the edge of the tub, listening to the steam fill the room. He pulled the letter out one last time. He had to finish it. He had to read the end. The handwriting on the final page was barely legible. It trailed off, weak and faint, as if the writer's energy was draining away with the ink. But the truth you need to know is this: none of this was your fault. Ethan scoffed. Of course it was his fault, he thought. He was driving. I don't blame you for leaving. You weren't ready for a love this big. I was too intense, too emotional, too complicated. I suffocated you, Michael. I tried to make you my whole world, and that wasn't fair to you. Ethan felt his heart break for the 19-year-old girl who wrote this. She was taking the blame. She was internalizing the abuse. She thought she deserved to be abandoned because she loved too much. But even when you walked away, I never hated you. I loved you, quietly, silently, in ways I never said out loud. And then the final paragraph, the one that shattered him completely. If I survive this night, if I get to live, I promise I won't look for you. I promise I'll let you be free. But I will never forget you. You were my first love, my only love, and a part of me will always belong to you in the wreckage of that car. Goodbye, Michael. Love, Laura. Ethan let the paper fall to the bath mat. A part of me will always belong to you. That was it. The admission. She had promised not to look for him, and she hadn't. She had kept her word, but she had also kept her heart tied to him. Ethan stared at the tiled floor. He felt like he was drowning. For 16 years, he thought he was the love of her life. He thought they were soulmates. But according to this letter, he was just the aftermath. He was the safe harbor she found after the storm. He was the man she settled for because the man she really loved, the only love, was gone. He wasn't her great love. He was her survival plan. The pain was so acute it felt physical. A cramping in his gut, a tightness in his throat. He couldn't live like this. He couldn't be the second-place prize in his own marriage. He stood up. He turned off the shower. He looked in the mirror. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked wrecked. "Enough," he whispered. He folded the letter carefully. He didn't put it in his pocket this time. He held it in his hand. He unlocked the door. He walked down the hall. The house was quiet again. Laura wasn't in the living room. He found her in the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to him, staring out the window at the rain. She looked small, fragile. Ethan stopped in the doorway. "Laura," he said. His voice was steady now, the calm before the storm. She turned around. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "Ethan," she whispered, "please tell me what's wrong. I can't take the silence." Ethan stepped into the room. He held up the yellowed envelope. Laura's eyes locked onto it. For a second, there was no recognition, just confusion. Then she saw the date. She saw the water stains. The color drained from her face so fast it was terrifying. She went ghost white. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. It wasn't the look of a wife caught cheating. It was the look of a person seeing a ghost. "Where?" Her voice was a strangled whisper. "Where did you find that?" "In your book," Ethan said, walking closer. "The blue one, Jane Eyre." Laura stood up, her legs trembling. She reached out a hand, as if to snatch it, but then pulled back. "I thought I lost this," she breathed. "I thought it was gone." "It wasn't gone," Ethan said, his voice hard. "It was hiding, like the truth." He held the letter out to her like a weapon. "Who is Michael?" Laura flinched at the name. She closed her eyes tight, as if the sound of it hurt her physically. "Ethan, please. Who is he?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising. "Is he the one? The one you always loved? The one you never forgot? Laura opened her eyes. Tears spilled over, running down her pale cheeks. It's not what you think, she sobbed. I read it, Laura. I read every word. Ethan shouted, the anger finally exploding. You wrote a goodbye letter to him. You said he was your only love. You said a part of you would always belong to him. He threw the letter onto the bed between them. 16 years, Laura. 16 years I've loved you. I thought I knew you. But I'm just the guy who came after, aren't I? I'm just the consolation prize because Michael left you in a ditch. Laura looked at him, horror dawning on her face. No. She shook her head frantically. No, Ethan, no. Don't lie to me. Ethan stepped closer, his own tears falling now. You kept it. For 20 years, you kept it. Why? If you don't love him, why is it in your favorite book? Why do you need a reminder of him in our house? The room fell silent, save for the sound of their ragged breathing. Laura looked down at the letter on the bed. She reached out and touched it with a trembling finger. She looked up at Ethan. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, aching sorrow. You think I kept this because of him? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The letter is to him, Ethan snapped. Yes, Laura said. She picked up the letter. She held it to her chest, right over her heart. I wrote this to him, she admitted. When I was 19, when I was bleeding out, when I was alone. And you still love him? Ethan accused, his voice breaking. Laura looked at him. A strange calm settled over her face. Sit down, Ethan, she said softly. I don't want to sit down. Sit down. It was a command, the kind of tone he had never heard her use. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, defeated. Laura stayed standing. She clutched the letter. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the old paper. I haven't spoken to Michael in 20 years, she began. I don't know where he is. I don't care where he is. Then why? Ethan asked, gesturing to the letter. Laura looked at the letter, then at Ethan. I didn't keep this because I missed him, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling again. I kept it because I needed to remember the girl who wrote it. Ethan frowned. What? Laura wiped her tears. She stepped closer to him. You know me as Laura, she said. Strong Laura, happy Laura, the Laura who loves to cook and garden and fix things. She tapped the letter. But this girl? The girl who wrote this. She was weak. She was pathetic. She let a boy treat her like garbage because she didn't think she was worth anything else. She took a shuddering breath. I wrote this thinking I was going to die. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. I realized that if I died, I would have died chasing someone who didn't care if I lived. She looked Ethan dead in the eye. I survived that night, Ethan. But the girl who loved Michael, she died in that car. Ethan stared at her. The anger in his chest began to loosen, replaced by confusion. I kept the letter, Laura whispered. Not to remember him. She knelt down in front of Ethan, placing the letter on his knee. I kept it to remind myself of what I survived. To remind myself that I was given a second chance. A chance to find a love that wasn't loud. That wasn't scary. That didn't leave me bleeding in the rain. She took his hands in hers. Her hands were warm. I didn't save it because I loved him, she said, her voice fierce now. I saved it because surviving that night is the reason I got to meet you. Ethan felt the world tilt. The twist hit him hard. She wasn't holding a torch for an ex-lover. She was holding a memorial for her past self. You, Ethan choked out. You aren't in love with him. Laura let out a wet, incredulous laugh. Ethan, he left me for dead. Pity him. I forgave him because I had to heal. But love him? God, no. She squeezed his hands. I kept this letter as a warning, a reminder never to let myself become that small again. Until I met you." She looked up at him with adoration. "And you never made me feel small. You made me feel safe. You made me feel like I didn't have to shrink to fit in your world." Ethan looked down at the letter on his knee. "If someone finds this, it means I never got the chance to tell you the truth." He realized now. The truth wasn't that she loved Michael. The truth was that she had fought to live. He looked at his wife. He saw the faint scar on her hairline that he had missed for years. He saw the strength in her jaw. He saw the survivor. The jealousy evaporated, leaving only shame. "I'm so sorry," Ethan whispered, tears finally spilling over. I thought you were pining for him." Laura reached up and wiped a tear from his cheek. "I know," she said softly. "I should have told you, but it was so ugly, and we were so happy. I didn't want to bring the ghost of that scared little girl into our life." "She's part of you," Ethan said, his voice thick. "I want to know her. I want to know all of it." Laura smiled, a genuine, heartbreakingly sweet smile. "You do know her, Ethan. She's the one who holds you extra tight during storms. She's the one who treasures every quiet Thursday." Ethan slid off the bed and onto the floor, pulling her into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent. Vanilla and flower and life. "I love you," he murmured into her skin. "I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered back, holding him tight. "More than I could ever write in a letter." An hour later, the rain had stopped. The house was quiet again, but the heaviness was gone. The air felt cleared, like the sky after a storm. They sat on the rug in front of the fireplace. A small fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ethan held the letter one last time. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It just felt like old paper. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking at Laura. She was leaning against his shoulder, watching the flames. She looked lighter, younger somehow. "I'm sure," she said softly. "I don't need it anymore." "Why?" She looked up at him. "Because I don't need to be reminded that I survived. I look at you, and I know I did." Ethan smiled. He handed her the letter. Laura took it. Her hands didn't shake. She looked at the date one last time. June 14th, 2005. "Goodbye, Michael," she whispered. Not with love, but with finality. She leaned forward and tossed the envelope into the fire. They watched in silence as the flames licked the corners. The paper curled and blackened. The blue ink turned to gray soot. The words "I loved you" burned away. The words "I'm scared" turned to ash. Within seconds, the letter was gone. Laura let out a long, slow breath. She rested her head on Ethan's chest. "I feel," she started, then paused. "What?" Ethan asked, kissing the top of her head. "Free," she said. "I finally feel like I can let that night go completely." Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer. The warmth of the fire seeped into their bones. "He was a fool," Ethan whispered. "Who?" "Michael. To leave you." Laura looked at the fire, watching the last sparks drift up the chimney. "Maybe," she said, "but he gave me the greatest gift." "What's that?" "He left," she said simply. "And because he left, I found you." Ethan held her tighter. The ghost was gone. The secret was out. And the silence in the house was no longer heavy. It was just peace. Ethan looked at the empty space where the letter had been. Love doesn't always speak loudly, he thought, echoing the realization that had settled in his soul. Sometimes, it hides in the resilience of a woman who chose to live. He kissed his wife. "Let's go to bed," he said softly. "Yeah," Laura smiled. "Let's go." Ethan sits in a leather armchair, a book in his hands, Jane Eyre. He closes it gently and looks up, his eyes kind and knowing. "We all carry ghosts," he says, his voice low and soothing. "Old letters, old scars, old versions of ourselves that we're afraid to show the people we love." He leans forward slightly. "But sometimes, sharing those ghosts is the only way to truly banish them. Laura thought she was protecting me from her pain. But in the end, her pain was the proof of her love." He places the book on the table. "If you're holding on to a letter, literal or metaphorical, maybe it's time to read it one last time. And then, maybe it's time to burn it." He smiles, a genuine, warm expression. "You're safe now. You survived." The screen begins to dim. If this story moved you, if it made you think of your own ghosts, let me know in the comments. And join me tomorrow, because the next story, his expression turns serious, filled with a new kind of gravity. It's about a mother who left a video diary for her daughter. She thought she was leaving a legacy of love, but she accidentally left a confession that would tear a family apart. You won't want to miss it. Subscribe, stay close, and remember, I'm listening.